Garu, please register with the link, whatever I have shared in the chat. Okay. Seems we haven't got the recorded session. So please register with that link so that we'll share today. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, yesterday I missed the first session. Just before going to the second day session, can you give overview session of yesterday? Just high level overview.
Yeah, same question from my side too.
Yeah, definitely we'll go through the recorded session tomorrow, but just a quick high or overview that will help us. Like
Yesterday,
Nothing
nothing.
help us.
Hi,
It's
I
very
shared that link also
hello.
in chat yesterday session recording.
Yeah, but
Please,
let
you can
me
save it. Okay. I shared the recorded session link in chat.
but let
Please,
me give
okay,
an
you can
overview.
check it.
Yesterday,
You
nothing
can go through it.
covered actually.
okay, got it.
It's basically some
Same
intro
Hey,
and what is a programming language and what are all the IDEs that we'll be using for this training. So apart from that, nothing was covered yesterday.
perfect. Thank you.
Sounds
Hey
good.
guys, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
Okay. A very good morning and good evening, guys. Yeah. So, before we jump into today's session, let me clarify. I have been listening to, various concerns. So first things first, yesterday it's just an introductory session where I have walked the folks through the course content I'm going to cover in the next 1 month. Okay. And, I have given a high level understanding on what you will get to learn. And then we just talked about what exactly a programming language is, as simple as that. Okay, you can probably go through the recording, guys, to put the discussion simple. If you have already registered and you are getting recordings, you're good to go. You don't need to do anything from your side. Okay, if you are joining today, you haven't registered yet. In order to get recordings, you'll have to register to the link and follow up with Lakshmi Garu from Career IT in order to get the link. It's as simple as that. Okay, hope I'm clear. Okay,
Yes.
now let's get started. So today we'll be jumping into technical concepts of Python, guys. I mean, before we actually jump into Python, we will try to understand, few other basics of programming language. So just like yesterday, I'm expecting this session also to be interactive. It was really a nice session yesterday. Most of you have interacted really well. Okay, expecting the same, right? Now we'll talk about classification of programming languages, guys. There are multiple classification. Okay. So it is really, really important for us to understand these classifications, because when we talk about Python features, right? Python would be falling into one of these categories, right? There are three different types of classification, I would say. One is high level programming language versus low level programming language. And second one is compiled programming language versus interpreted programming language. Okay. And, finally, we have um, procedural versus object-oriented programming language. Okay, now we'll talk about these differences. Let's start with the first classification, which is high level versus low level. Any idea what exactly a high level programming language versus low level programming language? Any idea?
Low level language is which machine can easily understand, whereas high level language where humans can easily understand.
Yes, as simple as that. Okay, so before we eventually get there, what is a computer, guys? It can just understand only zeros and ones, right? It cannot understand the English you're typing. For every instruction you are giving, it will be converted to the language understandable by the computer. Okay, so here comes the definition of high level and low level programming language. High level programming language is something which you can actually understand and pass those instructions to the computer, and low level language is something which is understandable by the computer. Okay, so it is more machine friendly than user friendly. For you to learn machine level language and then instruct your computer would be little difficult. Okay, I'm not saying not possible, but it is little difficult. Okay, so all the programming languages which you know, I know, are all high-level programming languages like C, C++, Java, Python, Scala, whatnot. They're all comes under high-level programming languages. And then talking about low-level languages, right? Assembly language, COBOL, they all comes under mission low-level languages or mission-level languages. Okay, but there is some kind of a debate on high-level programming language versus low-level programming language in internet. Maybe if you search in Google in couple of blogs, you will see a different direction to it. Okay, where they have defined low-level programming language is something which you write a lot of code, where you write a lot of code, and the high level programming languages are something where you write less code or less number of lines of code. What do I mean by that? Let me take an example. Okay, so we have a concept called linked list or a list. Okay, so we have a concept called linked list. At this point in time, we don't need to understand what it is, but I'm just picking list as an example. So for example, if you want to implement a linked list and okay, I'll give you a high level understanding. Linked list is something which would let you store a group of elements or multiple elements. Okay, maybe some 5 elements, 10 elements, 50K elements, or 1 million elements, doesn't really matter, but it will let you store multiple elements. Okay, so to implement the same in C or C++, you'll have to write some 100 lines of code, more than 100 lines of code, where you'll have to use concepts like pointers and other things. Okay, but when it comes to languages like Python and Java, right, it's a matter of one line of code. It's a matter of one line of code. You have the libraries available as a framework, and you use that library and directly create a linked list. Okay, so according to those blogs, right, C, C++ are low level languages and Java, Python are high level languages, but that's not true. Okay, so you might get confused if you are searching in internet, but I want to clarify that's not the definition of high level and programming, high level and low level programming languages, guys. So high level languages are the ones which you can understand and you can write instructions and pass it on to computer are high level languages, and then low level languages are the machine understandable languages. Okay, so you might ask me, boss, what advantages do we get between a high level and low level, right? So talking about high level, right? High level programming languages are user understandable, okay, or I would say user friendly. And secondly, uh, they are slower. The reason why I'm mentioning they're slower is you are giving instructions which you can understand. Somebody else have to convert those instructions to the machine understandable format. Otherwise, your computer cannot execute whatever the instructions you have given. Okay, so this conversion is an additional step, which makes high level languages a little slower. It's not considerable, but compared to low level, it's slower. Okay, and then talking about low level languages, these are machine understandable. Machine understandable, and it is faster compared to high level languages. And talking about high level, whatever the languages you are seeing today, they're all high level languages. Python, C, C++, right? And the low level languages, assembly language. Okay, and then COBOL.
Suresh, correction. COBOL is not a low-level language. It's a high level. It's a human interpretable. Because I was a COBOL programmer earlier. Just you will have like the same for loops. If else, everything are there in COBOL. And you have to compile.
One moment.
Assembler language for sure, right? Low level, but not
Yeah, assembly for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. Let me correct.
no problem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Kiran.
You're welcome.
Okay, so examples, high level Java, Python, C, C++, what are the programming languages you're seeing? And then low level programming languages is assembly language. Okay. Now moving on to the next classification, compiled versus interpreted. Okay, any idea guys on compiled versus interpreted?
So compiled means that the code is converted from high level to low level before it is
Mhm.
executed.
Mhm.
And interpreted means as the code is getting executed,
Mhm.
it is converted from high level to low level.
Yes, as simple as that. Just a moment. Yeah. So that is correct, guys. I'll tell you what exactly is the difference between compiled and interpretation. But before that, we'll have to understand couple of stages: compilation and execution. Any idea what exactly are these stages, compilation and execution?
In layman terms, compilation is a process, whereas the interpretation is a product, and the execution also is related to the product. It's just layman's understanding.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, as someone explained, right, compilation which will be generating the assembly language program, which a computer can understand. So in the execution, we'll be executing the program. So basically, you will be linking what are the DLLs or what is the output that compiler generates, that you will link and you will execute them in a sequence so that like the final output will be derived.
That's correct. Okay. So again, I'm putting it into a layman terminology, guys, simple terminology. Compilation is a process of, converting the code you have written in your understandable way to the machine understandable way, as simple as that. Okay. So basically, again, I repeat, compilation is compilation is a process of converting the code you have written to the machine understandable language. Okay, and there is a component called compiler which does that job. Okay, so there is a component called compiler which actually does this job. And once you have got the compiled code, which is a machine understandable code, okay, that code will be executed. Okay, so that process is what we call as execution. Right now, talking about compiled programming language and interpreted programming language, in compiled programming language, these two steps happen differently or separately. Okay, so once you have written your entire code, your code would be compiled by a compiler, and then the compiled code will be executed. Okay, and talking about interpreted programming language, right? So here there is a separate component called interpreter, and which does both the steps in one go. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Or what do we get as a programmer? In compiled programming language, you don't have flexibility of executing one line at a time. Say, for example, you're writing Java code, right? You write 10 lines of code and you execute that 10 lines of code in one go. Okay. And let's take interpreted programming languages like Python or Scala. Okay. In interpreted programming languages like Python and Scala, you can execute one line of code at a time, one line of code or one block of code at a time. Okay. So what's happening here is the compilation and execution is happening at that one level of code, sorry, one line of code or one block of code. Okay. So that's the difference between compiled and interpreted programming languages. So here you might ask me, boss, in that case, are the interpreted programming languages slow? Definitely yes. Answer is yes. Interpreted programming languages are slow compared to compiled programming languages. Okay. And the next question from you should be, boss, in that case, why Python is the most preferred programming language? Okay. So for example, today you have been hearing out this, right? Python is everything, Python is everywhere, be it any application, but that's not correct, guys. Okay. So for example, you talk about full stack development or web application, still Java is the most preferred programming language. It's not Python. Okay. Because yes, Python is definitely slower than Java, right? But when it comes to this data engineering or data side of the things, Python is the most preferred programming language. Okay, so be it writing a PySpark application or be it developing ML application, you might ask me why. The availability of libraries. The availability of libraries, the flexibility of development are the ones which are making Python the most preferred programming language compared to Java, because here performance difference whatever we get using Java and Scala is not that considerable, or that is I don't want to say it's not that considerable, but that is something which can be neglected when you compare the advantages that Python is bringing in. Okay, but like I was mentioning, if you take web development where performance does matters, Java is still the front runner. Okay, so Uh, again, talking about interpreted programming language or Python, it's a beginner-friendly language. We also call it as beginner-friendly language for the same reason, because as a developer, you can take full control. You write one line of code and then you execute it. You write second line of code, you execute it, see the output. Third line of code, you execute, see the output. Maybe if you are writing a block of code, maybe some if block or maybe some for loop. Okay, you write line those block of codes and then see what that block is doing. Okay, and there are IDEs which support you that type of development. Okay, for example, Google Colab, which we are going to use, will support that kind of development, and that development is what we call as REPL. REPL. Okay, so R stands for read, E stands for evaluate, and then P stands for print, L stands for loop. Okay, you can do all these operations line by line. Okay, so REPL mode will give you wings to execute your code one line at a time or one block at a time. Okay, so this is what you get from an interpreted programming language. And again, there is a huge debate going on in different blogs. Claiming Python is also a compiled programming language. Okay, so that is to some extent, if I go by textbook, I would agree Python is an interpreted programming language. But if I go by developer instinct, I would say Python is also a compiled programming language, because I could see the bytecode that is getting generated while I execute a Python code. Okay, so this is still a debatable topic, but in view of your interviews, Python is always an interpreted programming language. We'll go by textbook. Okay, are we good?
Hi, Suresh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Sarisha. So you were referring to ID, right? What is ID?
It's not IDE, Integrated Development Environment.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are we good? Everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
One question, Python,
Yeah, please.
typically interpreter, right? It's any language translator. That's how I look at it as interpreter. So it reads line by line and it will convert it process and it will convert into an output. So will
Yeah.
Python does the same thing or it will go by a block? A block of
When I
code
say
or line of code?
it's a line of code. When I say block of code, I mean to say your execution. Say, for example, you are implementing a if block. You cannot execute one line at a time in an if block, correct?
Yeah, we should look if block as one statement only in the
Correct.
programming language. So then
Correct.
we'll process the if and generate the output. Is that what?
Yes, statement is different, line is different, right, Satish? So because I don't want to confuse folks
Yeah.
saying ki tomorrow, boss, you said you can execute line by line, and in if block, if I write a line and execute, it is not getting executed. I don't want to hear that. So I'm
Oh,
mentioning it as block.
Okay.
But yes, if is a statement, single statement, agreed.
Got it.
Okay.
Suresh, can you just clarify that once again? Because I did understand it as like you can write one line and execute, and then you can also execute as a block. But now I'm a little confused with the discussion here.
So, Madhuri, do you have prior experience to any programming language?
No,
You
no.
don't need to write any language, but okay, let me tell you. So basically, there are few programming constructs. Okay. So for example, you want to execute some lines of code, maybe 5 lines of code or 6 lines of code, only when a condition is satisfied. Okay.
Correct.
So
Okay.
there we use if conditions. Okay. So what happens there is, this is how the syntax goes. If, and then we have condition. Okay. And then this is how your syntax would look like in Python. Okay. So what I'm trying to tell is you cannot execute these lines written inside the if condition one by one. Okay. So Satish concern was, in programming language, entire if block is considered as statement. That is correct. This is an
Okay.
if
Thanks.
statement.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
So the same I'm referring to as block.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Are we good, everyone? Yes, no, maybe.
I have one question.
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So when you say blocks, can we consider that as comparing to other languages in terms of methods?
No, method is a different, right?
Okay, we call the method whenever we require. It's like
Yes.
object oriented.
Yes, again, I don't want to call it as a method. I would still refer that to as a function because the definition of method is different.
Yeah. So
okay.
When we write in blocks in this Python, so how is the execution done when it comes to multiple blocks in the same file? Do we refer them to something like a method you were saying? Function?
Not really, right? It depends on how you write your code. Say, for example, if it is an object-oriented way where you implement classes and objects, it will be different. And then you write it line by line and execute it sequentially. The execution would be sequential. And methods, again, you create your own functions and then you call them. They will be executed as and when you have called them. Method definition and function definition and function call. Okay, so maybe if you can elaborate your question to the point, I can give you that specific answer rather than a generic answer.
Probably I'll pause my question here because I wanted to see when the real programming comes in and I can compare to what I was using in the other languages.
Okay, so you can tell me which language you are using or which language you are trying to compare, because I have hands-on with Java and Scala too. Maybe I'll try to give you a relevant example.
I'm sorry, I got disconnected. So I was using VB scripting, VB.
Oh, Visual Basic. Okay.
Now, So yeah, that is the reason I was, because we do write separate in the form of functions, right? But anyway, that's fine when it comes, because I have never seen Python. So once it comes to the real programming, I can try to be compared to what I was, my question was, so not an issue.
Sure. No worries, Satya.
Thank you.
Okay. You can bring that up any day. Now, moving on, the next classification is procedural and object oriented.
Can you please spell the difference between compilation programming and quick view?
Sorry?
Can you please tell the difference between the compiled programming language and interpret just a quick view?
So Sridhar, you just joined, or you couldn't understand
No,
our discussion early?
I understood the what is compilation, but just a quick difference between the compiled programming and interpreted.
Okay, I'll tell you in developer view. Okay. In compiled programming languages, you will have to write your entire code, compile and execute. As simple as that. Okay. Interpreted programming language, you will have more control. You don't need to write the entire logic. You can write one line of code, check the output, and then write the next line of code, check the output, write the next line of code, check the output. So, you'll have some kind of control over here. Okay. So the reason for the same is the process, the way these two programming languages gets executed. Okay, so in interpreted programming language, there is a component called interpreter, which is helping you to develop code this way. Okay, so forgetting about what happens in the back end, this is what you get as a developer. Okay, yeah, so to summarize, compilation and execution for a compiled programming language will happen in one go, whereas in interpreted programming language, both these steps will be happening line by line. Okay, and that would be taken care of by the interpreter. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now let's move on to the next classification, guys. Procedural and object oriented. Any idea? Difference between procedural and object oriented?
Object oriented is what you write in pieces of code with the functionalities, and you call them whenever you need, wherever you need. I mean, we write once and call it, use it multiple times.
Yeah.
Procedural. I don't have an exact definition, but it's something that executes.
You can just yeah,
it executes in a code. I could not get it. Sorry.
No problem at all. So anybody else would like to add?
Procedural programming, it's divided into small parts called functions, and object-oriented, it's called small parts are called objects.
Sorry, Madhuri?
In the procedural, it's also divided into small parts, but they're called the small parts are called functions. And in object-oriented, that's also divided into small parts, but it's called as objects, those small parts. Is that's where somewhere I read.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Might not be exactly, but okay, no problem. Any other directions?
Yeah. I think a procedural is like a series of structured steps. One after the other, you write it. Okay. The object oriented, the OOPS concept, where the earlier person told, right, we write a module and write a class and module and call from to use the repeated functionality instead of writing again and again. Use that one, define and write. I use it.
Yes. Okay. So at this point in time, for some of the folks, it might sound like a little French and Latin, what I'm going to talk for next 5-10 minutes, but I'll try to elaborate as much as I can, and I would let you ask questions if you're not clear. Okay, so this is little tricky to understand because we just got introduced to a programming language. Okay, now talking about procedural and object oriented. Okay, so we call it as OOPS concepts or object oriented programming structures. So procedural follows a top-down approach, guys. Procedural follows a top-down approach and object-oriented follows bottom-up approach. Okay, so what do I mean by this? So procedural way of implementing your code. You start with some point, which you call it as start, and then you continue building your solution one step at a time. Like Shiva was mentioning, you start at one point and you will continue building your application one step at a time. Okay, so you can bring in multiple features to structure your code. Say, for example, you have a reusable piece of code where you are calling it multiple times or where you are using it multiple times. You can create a function and then call it. That is also a procedural programming language. Okay. Or maybe you have some set of functions, right? And you are using those set of functions multiple times, like reading data from a file and then parsing your data, right? Likewise, I'm just randomly throwing some example, or maybe converting a date format from some format to other format. Okay, some repeated steps or some steps which you are repeating multiple times. So we can create functions for the same and then you can call them whenever is needed. That is still procedural. Okay, because even here you are starting at one point and building your solution one step at a time. Okay, now talking about object-oriented programming structure. So there is a reason why we call this as bottom approach, because bottoms up approach. The reason being, here you will have to understand what your what you are dealing with is capable of. Okay, so here we predominantly deal with something called as a class and an object. Something called as a class and an object. Class will simply have attributes and functions. Okay, so any function defined inside a class is what we call as method. Okay, so class will have attributes and then methods. Okay, and then we create objects to the class, right? So for example, I'm taking the simple class called students. Okay, let's say this is a class and we have students, and for student, let's say we have attributes like uh, maybe name and then age, the course you have opted for, and maybe the location from where you are joining. So these are what we call as attributes, and all the students will share the same attributes but different values. Say for example, Suresh is an object to this class. Suresh can be an object to this class who will have the same attributes, name, age, course, and location, but different values. Likewise, let's say Ramesh can be another object to the student class. Okay, so even Ramesh will have the same attributes, but different values for name, age, course, and location. Let's say there is another object, Naresh, created for the same class student. He will also have the same attributes, but a different values. Okay, and now let's say talking about methods, maybe let's say I have get marks. Okay, let's say get marks will bring or get marks will give you the marks scored by this particular student. Okay, if I call this get marks function or method with the Suresh object, it will give the marks of Suresh. And get marks, if I call this get marks method with Ramesh function, Ramesh object, it will give Ramesh marks. And similarly, if I call this get marks method using Naresh object, it will give Naresh's marks. Okay, maybe get marks is a method, and then let's say apply leaf is another method. I'm just giving some examples for what can be your methods. Okay, and then pay, fine. could be another method. Okay. And maybe borrow book from a library could be another method, right? And then return book can be another method, which is doing the respective functionalities in the backend. Okay, so for example, when you borrowed book, you will have a counter added saying was you have borrowed couple of books and then the book respective book names. And then when you return that book, counter will be decreased. Okay, now the books under your name would only be one. Okay, so here we create this structure once. Here we create this structure once, student, which is having some attributes and then some methods. And this structure or this functionality can be reused multiple times in the form of objects. I don't need to write a separate code for Suresh object. I don't need to write a separate code for Ramesh. I don't need to write a separate code for Naresh. Instead, I can create the template ones, which has attributes and which has functions. And then I can create objects and reuse this. I'll give you a best example, another best example, a real-time example. Okay. I'm not sure how many of you are using this, but if you go to udemy.com, okay. So you see all these courses, 2024 Web Development Bootcamp, Web Developer Bootcamp, Masterclass, Practical Web Development, or maybe if I go to JavaScript, you'll see multiple courses, right? Let me open, few of them. Okay. Now, if you go here, you see whatever the options you have for this course and whatever you can do with this course, you can do the same with this one as well. You see, you'll see the course content. You can add it to the cart. You can buy it now. Okay. If you bought it, you will be able to go watch the sessions and then you can track your progress. So these are all what we call as actions. And all the actions for all these courses would be same. Okay. So again, to create this analogy, you create a class called course. Okay. And all these courses are objects of that class course. As simple as that. Okay. Which will have the same methods, which will have the same attributes, but the content will be different. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the content is. If you have watched a session, it should track your progress. So you write the logic for tracking your progress once and use it for all these objects. Let me take a pause. Are we good?
Yes.
Yes.
Sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are the actions and methods both the same?
Yes, maybe action is not a technical word. So just because, whatever we do on a screen, we refer to that as an action, right?
Yeah.
So action is not a technical word. They are nothing but functions.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So it
here,
will have.
the code is an object, right? And the activities what we can do here is a method.
Yes. And you can refer all these things as attributes. Course content is an attribute. This attribute will be there for everything, which would show you the course content. Okay. And there are multiple classes in the same website, guys. It's not a single class. So for example, you can have a user class defined using which a user can.
I have a doubt, like the methods in that the classes will be defined.
Methods will be defined inside a class.
Okay.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm talking about, different classes, right? You can take user class using which user can perform user actions, like login, sign up, or maybe adding an address, adding a payment, adding or editing the details, right? So any application you are developing, when you have implemented it using object-oriented programming structures, it will bring the reusability component. Not just that, it will give you a lot of additional advantages too. Okay. So yeah. Now coming back to our discussion, procedural versus object-oriented programming structure. Python is an
This is,
object-oriented programming
Suresh,
language.
I have a
Yeah,
doubt
please.
here.
Yeah,
It's not a
please.
doubt. I don't have any prior knowledge on coding, but I have like one thing. If we are writing a code in a real time, okay, so we can put all the functions in one method and we can call them whenever we want and or whenever we are writing a different types of code, developing the code, right?
I'll tell you what. So the reason why I have stopped you is using the right technical jargon. Okay. So putting all the functions in a method is wrong. Sorry to correct you in the very early sessions, but I want every one of you to use the right words, right terminology, right from the day one, so that will not be using this and that language during interviews. Okay. So first things first, the way you want to implement your code, we are not yet there. Okay. But since you're asking this question, generally what we do is there is a concept called modules in Python. Okay. Let's say I have 10 different functions which I use repeatedly in my application. Okay. What I'll do is I'll put all the 10 different methods in one module. I import that module and then call those functions. And this module, right, it is not limited to just my application. Let's say in your team, the other developers are developing 10 more applications. Okay. And let's say if they want to use that module, they can also use that module too. It's a kind of package. Okay.
So, Suresh, instead of calling both method and functional, can you use only one, either function or method? Like, you're calling both, so they're getting confused.
We can forget about method because anyway, we are not going to get into object-oriented programming structures.
Yeah, just we can use only one function.
We'll use function.
Yeah, that sounds good. So both are like, confusing.
Now, I have used methods because I was explaining OOPS. So any function you define inside a class is what we call as method. Okay. Are we good, everyone? Yes, no, maybe.
Yep. Yes, you're right.
Okay.
One thing, the class means, for example, the login thing is the course is a class, and in that these things are methods.
Yes. So this add to cart, buy now, tracking your progress, watch, all these methods, all these are methods.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Suresh, I just wanted to give, elaborate the example that what you quoted to differentiate between what a procedure language and the object-oriented OOPS concept. See,
yes,
for example, if we have two students, a student A and student B, and if the requirement is to sum of their marks in 5 subjects, then for example, then we need to have a separate variable defined. Student A English, what is the marks? Student A Max, how much he got it? Student A Social Studies, how many marks he got it in that? So similarly, you need to define another variable, student B English, student B Max. So that's how you need to define variables for how many students we have in class, those many different variables that we need to define, so that you can differentiate when you are calculating the total sum of each student for all marks, right? So like what are the variables that you need to combine, and also that statement, the total sum, you will write multiple statements. For example, for student A, you need to write student A English plus student A Max plus student A Physics, something like that. Then you will get the total marks. So that's how you will write in a procedure language. Okay, so since there is no kind of a reusability, or like you don't find the common characteristics between each student, right? So in procedure, you don't look at them as a student or object. So you will define variables in order to meet the solution. Okay, the solution here is to calculate the sum of all subjects for each student. So how many lines of code that we need to write, it will become very lengthy when you achieve the same thing in procedure language. But when it comes to object oriented, the core Now, core concept here is student marks. So we know like there is an entity called student. So we'll create an object or a class student, and student will have certain marks. So then you will define all those as variables. So each student will have the same subjects. So the amount of lines that you write in a object-oriented programming, it will drastically low when compared to procedural program language.
Yeah. I mean, that's a legitimate example, guys. Basically, that's an outcome of an object-oriented programming language, or the advantage, I would say. So in a procedural programming language, the number of lines of code will definitely be high. Okay. So what he was mentioning is whatever the subject 1 marks, subject 2 marks, subject 3 marks, Satish was mentioning, right, are these attributes. Okay. So for example, you have to deal with 2 different students, maybe Suresh and Ramesh. You'll end up creating 8 different variables. Okay, Suresh name, Suresh age, Suresh course, Suresh location, Ramesh name, Ramesh age, Ramesh course, Ramesh location. Okay, whereas you do the same using class, you end up creating only 4 variables and initialize those values corresponding to a particular object. Okay, so instead of writing 4 lines of code, you'll end up hardly writing, maybe 2 to 3 lines of code where you create an object and then write a constructor. Again, I don't want to get into those technical jargons to confuse you at a very early stage, but to put it in a simple terminology, instead of 8 lines of code, you'll end up writing maybe 1 or 2 lines of code maximum. That is for 2 students. Okay, so if it is 3, 12 versus 3. If it is 4, 16 versus 4. Okay, so this is just for variable creation. And likewise, when you want to, create those methods or use those methods, like he picked some as an example, but you can take any of these examples, like applying leave or getting the total marks. Okay, so instead of writing that code multiple times, you write it once and then you call it as and when needed. Okay, that's a good example. But I'm not sure how many of you were able to understand this, because I haven't yet introduced you guys to variables and other things. But here the primary point of discussion is reusability, writing the less code, using it multiple times. Okay, just like the Coursera example, sorry, the Udemy example. Okay, you implement a module once in object-oriented programming structure and then you replicate it by objects. Okay, does that make sense, everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Now, so we were talking about Python, right? But how many of you know who invented Python? Any idea?
Vander Rossum.
Okay, so Guido van Rossum. He's the one who invented Python. Okay, so my lifetime is not enough to thank this guy. Okay, I'm not sure how many of you have exposure to other programming languages, but I started my career as a Java developer. Again, not a pure Java developer though. I was using Java for developing MapReduce applications. Okay, and then I have implemented some core Java applications as well. Never into full stack, but after I have moved to Python, after implementing Java and Scala applications for almost 5.5 years, okay, I felt relieved. Okay, now my life is really, really smooth and easy. Okay, I thank this guy every single day when I log in. Okay, so I never start my sessions without thanking him. Right, now let's talk about Python features. So Python is a high-level programming language. Python is an interpreted programming language. Python supports object-oriented programming structures. Okay, and we have a lot of other features too, but I will take a pause here for today. Okay, because to explain the other features, we will need to get introduced to variables and data types. Okay, we'll start from variables and data types tomorrow, but before we leave, I'm going to introduce Google Colab environment so that you can create one for yourself. Okay, I'm not sure how many of you have already created or already have Google Colab environment, but you just go to Chrome or Google, just type Google Colab, C-O-L-A-B. Okay, so the first link you see here is Google Colab environment. Colab.research.google.com is the website. Okay, so in order to have this or in order to use this, all you need to have is your Gmail account. So you have your Gmail account, you should be able to use Google Collaboratory Notebooks. Okay, so this is how your homepage would look like. Either you can select a new notebook here, or alternately you can select a new, you can create a new notebook from the menu File, New Notebook. It will create a new notebook for you. Okay. You might ask me, boss, don't we need to install Python? Don't we need to install anything? No, nothing. This is a cloud-based notebook environment provided by Google. Okay, for free of cost. Okay, so you might ask me, boss, then where is Python installed? How can we run Python here? So Python is installed in the backend, right? Google is giving you that Python environment. I'm connecting to a hosted runtime. Okay, hosted runtime. It is hosted by Google, and you are getting it for free of cost. You can check the this thing too. So you are connected to Python 3 Google Compute Engine backend. Okay, and this is what you are getting. You are getting 12.7 gigs of RAM and 107 gigs of disk. So basically, this 107 gigs of disk is my drive, Google Drive. Okay. Now moving on. Yeah, next important thing after looking at this one is the version. So we are going to learn Python 3, the latest version. Okay. So a very simple code to start with, print hello world, which is the first program in any programming language. This is as simple as printing hello world in Python. Okay, so just printing a hello world. If you have to do the same in Java, right, you'll have to create a class, some class name. Okay, and then you'll have to create a main method. Main method is public static void main, and then string args. Okay, and then system dot out dot println hello world. So this is what it looks like in Java. Okay, we are lucky we don't have to deal with this. Okay, let me take a pause. Are we good?
Yes. Yes, Suresh.
Yeah, Suresh, one quick thing,
Yeah, Shiva.
Google is okay, but when you are installing the real world of the project execution, we need to set up the Python and all the things right. Better, you can give the chance to set up the environment Python as a quick, and then that is
I'm gonna
about
cover
place.
that, Shiva. I'm gonna cover that, but I'll not be using that predominantly. Okay, so probably once we are done with the initial sessions, the basic concepts, I'll be showing you how to install PyCharm and develop your application there. Okay, so I'll be showing you how to install those packages, how to install how to create this VENV projects, virtual environment projects, and then how you can leverage Anaconda's environment in PyCharm and how to debug your code. I'm going to cover all those topics. But for most of the folks who are freshers, it would be really helpful if they start with Google Colab, where you'll get less questions on the environment installation. Probably let them get hands-on for a couple of weeks, and once they're comfortable, they'll be able to deal these things by themselves.
Okay.
And also there is another reason for choosing Google Colab, be it data engineering or data science, right? We use a notebook kind of an environment to develop our applications. Okay, so for example, you take Databricks. Databricks boils down to a notebook environment. You take Anacondas. Anacondas, we use Jupyter Notebook. Again, it's a notebook. It's not cloud-based though, but again, it's a notebook. So that way, I'm trying to make yourself acquainted with notebook environment and REPL mode of development. Okay, but like I said, I will be introducing you to IDE as well. We'll be using PyCharm. Like I was mentioning in the yesterday's session, it doesn't really matter whether it is PyCharm or VS Code or IntelliJ IDE. At the end of the day, you learn one IDE and it would be same for other IDEs too. Maybe you'll have to find the corresponding options. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, that should be fine, Suresh.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you all. See you tomorrow. Good day and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you very much.